put that together.
Okay. All right. So here we go. So we're starting a series of Hasidic stories, and I'll just say a few words about what Hasidic movement was. So basically, the Hasidic movement was basically Hasidus is the baby of Kabbalah, to make it in a simple wording. And Hasidus is if Judaism until Hasidus was very much about the what, then later what the Hasidus brought into our lives is the why and the intention. Is sometimes it doesn't matter so much what you do, it matters why you do it, and it matters where your heart is when you do it. So really, this is what Hasidus talks all about. And it's not like it's a new idea in Judaism, because it corresponds very well with the idea in Sanhedrin, in the Talmud, that talks about Rachmana libabai, that Hashem wants the heart. And it corresponds very strongly also with the book of Samuel, where it says that Hashem is looking for the heart. So sometimes, like whatever it is that you do a little bit and your heart is in the right place matters much more than you do a lot and your heart is not in the right place. That's like in a nutshell. So, and then also another idea to understand is like that we want to purify our heart. So our heart is so to speak gets contaminated. I don't know if it's like maybe some of it we bring from a past reincarnation. Maybe it's things that we've grown on our heart. How do you say them? How do you call them? Like you have in your garden, you have the flowers, and then you have the weeds right around our hearts. So the weeds could be contained of anger or sadness or jealousy, or another term in Yiddishkeit, which I found difficult to find in English the word, but is tzarut ayin. It's not exactly jealousy, because jealousy is I'm jealous that you have something. But tzarut ayin in Hebrew is more like the idea that I can't be happy that you're happy. Even if I have everything in the world, I can't be happy that you're happy.
So what is it in this case mean?
Tzarut ayin, narrow-eyedness.
Narrow, ayin.
Yeah, ayin, narrow-eyedness. Okay. Yeah, basically narrow. Right, right, exactly, right. So. And basically, Reb Nachman talks a lot about the idea that at the root of all these, there is one common denominator, which is basically our ego, which is basically thinking I deserve something more than somebody else, and not understanding that Hashem has enough of it for all of us, enough of everything, enough of love, enough of money, enough of health, enough of everything. Enough of nice cars and nice houses and whatever, and cute dogs, right? He has enough for everybody. So we could really rejoice in somebody's joy. So I thought of telling a story in that sense, but then with what we're going through today and this week, with waiting for our hostages to start coming home, God willing, I felt like my heart is in a different place. So I did like a U-turn, and I'm going to start from a different story. And so the story that is called To Cry with Every Person, basically. To cry with everyone. So the story is being told by Reb Shlomo Carlebach. And he's telling how in his house, like his house was always open, his parents' house was always open to everybody. And it was like a train station, and everybody were coming in and out. I knew him personally. I know his own house. Then later when he became an adult was also that way. And everybody would just come in and open the refrigerator. And, it was like, it was too much. It was too much. But it was unbelievable. The energy around that was unbelievable. The feeling, I'm sure it wasn't that great for his children, But for the people who experienced that kind of generosity and love and open-heartedness, it was unbelievable. So, so one time when he was very little, and he says most of the people who would come would be the, the outcasts of the community, the poor people of the community. And one time he remembers that president of the shul, who was a multimillionaire, came to talk to his father. And when he came in, Shlomo told him, wait, sit down, I'll go and get you a piece of cake. And he ran into the kitchen. He was a very little kid. He was like maybe 4 or 6. He went into the kitchen and he brought him a piece of cake. And then he says, no, I don't want the cake. I just want to talk to your father. And I was a very little kid. And I said, you have to eat first.
Wait, who said that?
Shlomo.
Shlomo.
Yeah. So finally his father came out of the room and he said, it's okay, Shlomo, if he doesn't want to eat, he doesn't have to eat, right? But anyway, that's how he was brought up, And he said people would come all the time with all kinds of different, troubles. And my father, he says, as much as I love people, he says, you have no idea, to what extent love can get. As much as I love people, my Abba loved people 1,000,000 times more, he says. So one time this important Rav came to our house and he wanted to talk to my father. And after him, a simple man came in to meet my father. And my father wasn't home at that moment. And the simple Yid who didn't know my father thought that the rabbi sitting in the hallway waiting for my father is my father. So they started talking between them. And I was sitting closely, overhearing how this simple person is telling this important rabbi his life story and all his trouble. So he starts telling how he was bankrupt and his wife is sick and his children are sick and all the trouble in the world. And he says to the rabbi, what should I do? My life is such a mess. And the rabbi starts asking him, well, do you keep Shabbat? And the simple Yid says to him, no, I'm not religious. So he says, well, what do you think, right? So, and, in everything that the person says, right, it's like the rabbi, instead of showing empathy, is like everything that he says, well, you're bankrupt. Obviously, you're not religious. Your kids are sick. Obviously, you're not religious, So, and the guy just, is at the, is about to cry. And he says, I don't know what to do, Rabbi. I'm totally broken. And the Rav continues and he says, well, do you put on tefillin? And he said, I told you already, I'm not religious. And the rabbi says, So, as if he's saying, well, if I was God, I would have put you down a long time ago. It's a miracle that you're even alive at this point with everything that you're not doing in the world, right? And that's how it continues going. Every time that the Yid tells him about his trouble, the rabbi mentions another mitzvah that the Jew doesn't keep. And I, as a little kid, was seeing this guy just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking inside himself. And I felt how this man is being so disappointed and so regretting that he even came to us, right? And I was shrinking inside myself, but I was a little kid and there was nothing I could say and do. And all I could do is I was just sitting there and praying for my father to come in and save the situation, save the day. And then finally, Baruch Hashem, my father came in and right away he saw the person's face. And he just told everybody, please wait for me. And he just went and he took the guy and he gave them a big hug and he took him aside. And I saw how the guy is starting to tell my father his stories. And my father was just sitting there crying with him and listening and not saying one word and holding his hand the whole time. And I was so proud of my father. And I want you to know that this, so to speak, not religious man became one of my father's big students. And he became a homebody in our house. And he used to come for Shabbat and for holidays. And later all his children went to yeshivas, and one of them even became a yeshiva, a Rosh Yeshiva. So that reminds me of another story that is being told about the Vorker. So the Rebbe of Vorka. So one time a Jew came to the Rebbe of Vorka and he was crying. Rebbe, I'm so helpless. My child is sick. He's going to die, God forbid. I beg you, please pray for his health, for his recovery. And the Vorka Rebbe was sitting there and listening, closing his eyes for a long moment and saying, Dear brother, I'm so sorry to tell you, but in my prayer I see that all the gates of heaven are closed. And you should go home and say goodbye to your son. And the guy just started crying. What could he do? What could he do? And he just went back to his wagon. And when he's crying the whole way, and half an hour later, he hears another carriage coming behind him. And when he looks around, he sees that it's the Vorka Rebbe himself who is chasing him. And he asks him to stop the wagon, and he sits him next to him. And he says to him, after you left, I couldn't stop thinking about you and your son. You looked so broken, and I was thinking to myself, maybe I can't help you, but at least I can cry with you. So I came to cry with you. And the Vorker put his arm around the shoulder of the Yid, and he started crying from the depth of his heart with him. And to his astonishment, the man saw that the Vorker is crying on his son more than he ever cried for anything in his own life ever before. That the Vorker's tears are much bigger than his whole life, his entire life. So he started crying, and he started feeling like his prayer is deepening and deepening and deepening. And for a whole long hour, they were sitting there crying beside each other, praying their hearts out. And when the Rebbe picked up his head, he wiped off his tears, and he smiled a big smile. And he says, your face is a totally different face now. Do you have a bottle of wine in the wagon by any chance? And the Jew said, yes, I do. So he says, please bring me the wine. We need to make a l'chaim. So without understanding what's happening, the Yid brought the wine and brought the wine glasses, and he poured the wine, and they started making a l'chaim. And he said, l'chaim, Rebbe, but what's this l'chaim all about, you know? And the Rebbe says, your tears opened up the heavens, and your son is going to live. L'chaim, l'chaim. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Vorka was known to have a heart that was open enough for everyone. There was a time when the Vorker had a little makolet, a little store, grocery store, and when somebody would come into him to buy like a little fish or something, he would ask him, you sure you want to buy fish by me? You should know that there are a few other stores here that have amazing fish as well. And he would explain to the guy, you know, what kind of great fish that guy has and what kind of great fish whatever this other one has. And many times he lost customers that way. And only if the customer had insisted and said, no, I want to buy your fish, would Rabbi Yitzchak of Vorka sell him his fish, right? So one time, a Jew opened up a store across the street from the Vorker, mamish across the street, and it kind of got Rabbi Yitzchak worried, but not for the fact that he was worried for his own parnasa, but for him destroying the other person's parnasa. So, in order for the competition to be fair, what he started to do is to open his store only on the hours that the other guy was open to. He would never come earlier or stay later. He would only open on the exact hours as the other guy did. And since the Vorker used to wake up early, many times he would go and knock on the guy's door and say, go and open your store. We need to start having business, right? It's getting late. People are coming to buy. And only after the guy opened his store, he would open his store. So after a few weeks, the worker understands that the competition is still not very fair. And people prefer to buy by the worker because his groceries are better. So, but not only they come to him for his groceries are better, but they also come to him because his words of wisdom and inspiration, they just enjoy coming to him. It's fun to come to his store. It's like the local club. So, and he saw how his neighbor with the store across the street is being a little bit, agitated, aggravated by it. And he lifted up his eyes to heaven and he said, the worker, and he said, Ribono shel olam, I can't have parnasa over the sorrow of another human being. And the next day, he closed his store. Unbelievable, right?
So when is the period for these stories? When is the time?
We're talking about, let's say, 17th, 18th, 19th century. And the
19th
beginning.
century.
And even the beginning of the 20th century.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we ask questions?
Please, yeah.
So what's interesting is we're talking about, let's say, is it Vorka or Dvorka?
Vorka.
Vorka.
Vorka, yeah.
Are we talking about, we're talking about their great love and their great compassion. Wouldn't you agree there's also a deep fear of heaven? In other words, a fear of being responsible of hurting another Jew, like realizing the enormity of that.
Totally.
So it's both fear and love here. Awe and love.
Yeah, but it's like it's the fear that is being induced by the chesed, by the love.
Right.
Right? It's not fear of consequences. It's not what Chassidus calls the lower kind of fear or awe, which has to do with what I'm going to gain or not gain, even spiritually, not even technically, financially, but spiritually, whether I'm going to gain the olam haba or not gain the olam haba. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, is my heart completely clean? Are my deeds completely clean of any
bad motives or evil?
Yes, yeah.
So that is a kind of fear.
Yeah.
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 And it's coming, yeah.
Yeah. That is a healthy awe, a healthy fear, right? Definitely, like hard to aspire to that level, like absolutely beyond anything that we can comprehend probably. But beautiful. Like, how do you feel about it, Tzipi?
I don't think that it's beyond comprehension because that wouldn't make sense. It has to be within our comprehension, otherwise there's no point. I think that it's about proving to yourself that you're a better person, that you can be a better person than you think you are.
Right. Right.
I think that's what it's about. And that also, in a sense, is an ulterior motive. So I don't
that's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
It's possible to be absolutely pure.
Right. You really,
because you say, well, I'm doing okay, but I want to do better because I want to be the best there is. Ooh.
Right. Right. So in Chabad, they have the term called the Beinoni, which I have a difficult time, accepting into my life, because I want to take these stories, like you said in the beginning, as something to aspire to. So there is something called Al Tehi Tzadik Albeh. Don't be much of a righteous. But for me, I don't know whether I take the Torah stories or I take the later Tanakh stories, or I take those stories, the Chasidic stories. So in every story you see, on one hand, human faults, and on the other hand, an aspiration, or maybe in other stories, an aspiration to be better. And to me, that's where the dance of life is happening. between all of us having human faults and all of us needing to desire to be as best as we can and not stopping at something, saying that one was a Rebbe, that one was Moses, that one was the Rambam, that was the Rorker, and I'm just a simple Miriam.
You know, I feel like though, I'm not a big neighbor. I mean, I'm not knowledgeable a lot of Italian, but I listen a lot to Rabbi Wagner. I listen to a lot of his classes. Anyway, he wrote an article this Shabbos. It was unbelievable. I could give it over in one sentence, but anyway.
Please.
Yeah, it's okay. But I just want to ask you, but the little I've learned of Tanya, being a Benoni, it ain't simple. It's
No, it ain't
very
simple.
high.
Right.
It's not
Right.
like settling at all. I mean,
Right.
we're talking about somebody who never sins, who can.
No, we're talking of someone who does sin and does get up.
Oh, I thought what I
Yeah.
learned. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, a tzaddik is someone who doesn't sin.
No, what I learned is that a Benoni has both sides, and he has to struggle.
Right.
But he doesn't sin. That's what I thought a Benoni was. So I always asked when I was in classes, who does that? Who never sins? Anyway, so the point is, he said, well, we aspire to that. And according to Tanya, the tzaddik is someone who doesn't have to fight the
To
war.
struggle.
Right. Anyway.
I find it hard to believe, according to more ancient writings,
Yeah.
which says in the Tanakh, "En tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yecheta." So like maybe it was more understandable to the symbol of tzaddikus, to Yosef HaTzadik, that it's just piece of cake not to sleep with Potiphar's wife. Piece of cake to forgive your brothers. But that's not what the story tells.
That's not human, though.
That's not human.
It can't be that simple, because otherwise it wouldn't be an accomplishment.
And the story, the pshat of the story.
Isn't the point surely that you fall over and you get up?
Right.
Not that you stay in the mud?
Right. And the pshat of the story of Yosef HaTzadik is, what we learn about Potiphar's wife is more from the Medrash, but what we learn about the struggle with his brothers, in the Psukim itself, we see that he's struggling inside himself.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the symbol of tzaddikus. So it's hard for me to say that a tzaddik doesn't struggle.
I know, that's what the Tanya says.
I know. I don't know, maybe that Baal Tanya wants to give us an aspiration modality, to something to say, you could reach that level. But I feel that, I don't know, from my search in life, from my spiritual search in life, I feel that's devastating.
Okay.
I feel like it's a little, like you feel so bad about yourself. You end up feeling so bad about yourself.
But
and you end up.
Ego too.
That's ego too. But I saw so many people trying to be that tzaddik,
Right.
and in the end not doing anything.
But you can't eliminate your ego, because then you'd be a rag. You wouldn't be a human being. You would be a rag. The point has to be, really does, that you put one foot in front of the other, and it's hard, but you put the other foot in front of this one, and you keep going.
And you keep going, right? I think there are two senses to the word ego. One is the regular ego that we're talking about in psychology and whatever. I think the Jewish ego that we're talking about is that ego that I come to realize, at least in my understanding, that every time I want to feel I did something, instead of saying I did it,
Right.
I'm like, thank you, Hashem, for putting it in my hands to do it.
Right.
And that puts me in this, it aligns me with the spiritual energy that doesn't allow me to, fall and need to get up. And because every time I felt like I did it, something happened to crush me. Whether it was emotional or physical or financial or technical, it doesn't matter. Something came to show me, you think you did it? Without the heavens' help, you would have never done it. And when I come to, realize life on the level of like, wow, Hashem, thank you for putting all the circumstances that to allow it to happen, then you can move on in that sense of like putting the next foot in front of the other without feeling the setbacks. What I meant when I said before that aspiration to this highest level of tzaddikus, without the struggle, with thinking that there are some people who don't struggle for that,
Right.
I think that puts us in a too bad of a setbacks.
Okay.
That's what I
It
meant.
wasn't for me, but I understand.
Yeah.
I hear you. It's
Yeah.
like there's a category I can never aspire to.
Right.
I got you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the next story I want to tell is a very touching story.
Well, I really feel a very deep, now for myself, personal, a deep acceptance of my limits. And I keep, like you said, just gratitude, taking responsibility, gratitude, ask Hashem to do the rest of the work, and then I take another step and another step. So
Right.
it's just a letting go of,
I think the point is that it's,
but my perfectionism always wanted to be a pure tzaddik. I wanted to be like Moshe
Yeah.
Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
And for me, that was unhealthy. I didn't really understand who my real limits and who I really am
Right.
and what I have to struggle with.
Right.
So we will come at it from different, it's like
Right.
different words.
So there's a beautiful saying that Reb Zusha used to say, when I come to heaven, they
Right.
won't ask me why you weren't Moses, they'll ask me why you weren't Zusha.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest role models, I think. On one hand, I can continue wanting to be as holy as Moses or as Reb Zusha, but I still need to remember that I'm
You still
Miriam.
need to be authentic.
I need to be Miriam, exactly. I need to do what I came into the world to do,
Right.
not what they came into the world to do. Yeah.
See, I think that what we need to be grateful for, what we ought to be grateful for, is that we get the strength to get up and take the next step. That we don't just collapse
Totally.
in a moral heap and just get so depressed that we can't get up.
Totally.
Or at the other end, get lost in grandiosity.
Right.
I used to just get so lost in this perfectionism and grandiosity. It's all ego. It's a killer.
Mamash. Mamash. And I want to mention another thing from Ezekiel, which talks about the reviving of the dry bones. And it says there, "V'achayot ratzo v'shov." And Chassidus says, so in simple translation, the animals are going back and forth. What does it mean the animals are going back and forth? The animalistic soul, right, that has the setback and gets up again and puts the next foot in front of the other one and gets up again, right? So that's the animal soul that has all these setbacks and decides to get back again, to try again, to be holier. But the Chasidic explanation says hachayut ratzo v'shov, not hachayot, which means the reviving of the soul comes, and it talks about it like this is the Messianic era.
Desire for living.
No, the vitality of life, the libido, the vitality of life comes from the understanding that life is fall and get up, and
Right.
fall and get up, and continue walking again. And Reb Nachman says that's the whole secret of life.
Hopefully, know how to fall.
Right, know how to fall, and know how to fall. There's another beautiful pasuk in Tehillim says, "Hashamayim kis'i ve'aretz hadom raglai." The sky is my seat, my throne, and the aretz, the ground, is like the land, the world where we live. Yeah, not the angels. Is like the. It's like the what?
Footstool.
The footstool. Yeah, the footstool. So for my feet, yeah, for God's feet. So meaning that the again, like we were saying before, so it says like it's like the letter, right? And we're reading about the letter, Jacob's letter, right? So we're climbing up and down.
A ladder, right?
Yeah, we're climbing up and down. So when you fall, I heard a beautiful explanation. When you fall, don't hear the noise of the falling. And when you get up, don't hear the noise of the getting up. If you feel the noise of the falling, it means that you were hearing also the noise of the getting up, because you were like, look how high I climbed, right? So when then you fall from a very high place, right? But if you're like, you don't make a big matter about climbing and you don't make a big matter about falling. You're just like, okay, once I'm here, once I'm here, once I'm there, and I'm doing the dance of life quietly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't like celebrate or get depressed over.
We do celebrate, but by saying thank you, Hashem, for putting in my hand to do what I accomplished. And remembering that it's the energy of Hashem that have now allowed it to my life, whether it's spiritual accomplishments or mitzvahs accomplishments or doing good deeds accomplishment or going to work and making money accomplishment. It doesn't matter, or cooking a meal for myself. It doesn't matter what I accomplished.
Yeah.
Or took my dog on a walk. It doesn't matter, right? Like whatever I do in life, the fact that I made myself get out of my cortisol morning mode
Actually,
and do something.
Cortisol really is a good thing.
Yeah, cortisol is supposed to wake us up, except we misinterpret
Like exactly what
it.
you were saying, right?
We misinterpret
but then
it.
our moods and our ego make it so nightmare.
Right, right. And our Yetzirah comes and says, yeah, of course you're anxious because this and that is happening in your life, right? Right. And yesterday was not good and your whole life was not good. And, why should today be any better, right? But then we come and tell ourselves, no, that cortisol came here to wake me up and set me on my breakfast and get me going and get me doing something. And I will tell my cortisol, my friend, maybe yesterday was not that great, but today is going to be much better.
Yeah, the cortisol's part. It's actually not the ahavat.
Right.
It's just
Right.
energy. That's all it is.
It's a hormone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, another story? Okay, all right. So this is a story about the Bach and the neighbor that he was supposed to have in Gan Eden. Okay, so one time the Bach wanted to know who his neighbor is going to be in heaven, and he made a shaila, like a shaila, a question. And they told him that if he merits to sit, the Bach, just to say a little introduction, was a very holy man in the 16th century. And he wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, one of the most important commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. And so he was a very holy man, considered to be a very holy rabbi. But one time he wanted to know who his neighbor will be in Gan Eden. And they told him that if he merits to sit in Gan Eden, then his neighbor is going to be the simple Yid from a city called Lemberg. And let's call this Yid Moishele, okay? So the Bach, who never heard about this Moishele before, decided he needs to go and see who his neighbor is going to be. So he went to Lemberg. And at that time, he was already quite a famous rabbi because he was the Rebbe of Krakow. And he didn't want to be identified, so he disguised himself. And he went there under a different name. And when he reached Lemberg, he tried to find out who this Moishele is. And everybody said the only Moishele they know is like this simple man, a Baal Bayit, who is a good person, gives tzedakah, but he's nothing special. No special tzaddik. And in his heart, the Bach started feeling, how come me, who is giving my whole life, working 24/7 to serve Hashem, to try and grow in mitzvahs. I hardly eat, I hardly sleep, I only try to do good things, and I only devote myself to spirituality. How come this Yid, who is hardly a Baal Bayit, who gives a little tzedakah, is going to be my neighbor in heaven? So in the meantime, he heard that son of this guy is getting married. So he thought to himself, okay, I may as well hang around for the wedding. And, in our days, we're inviting all our friends and maybe preferably the ones who will give a fatter check, right? But in those days, who you invited to the wedding first and foremost were the poor people of the community. And not only you invited the poor people of the community, but you set them in the middle, and the family and the friends would sit around them to give them all the respect. So not that the poor people of the community should feel like they're little beggars who are sitting in the corner and nobody wants to see them. So anyway, they're walking down the aisle to the chuppah, Moishele and his son, and the Bach is walking behind them to see what happens. And suddenly he hears awful cries. And he stands and he tries to hear where the cry is coming from. And he sees a 17-year-old boy crying. And he runs to the boy, and the boy is one of those poor people who came to the wedding, and he's waiting for the chuppah, and he goes over to him and he says to him, like he can't, he can't go over to the chuppah knowing that somebody is crying at his son's wedding. So
Sorry, the simple.
the simple man.
Yeah.
And the Bach is walking behind to see what's going to happen.
Right.
So the simple Moishele goes over to the 17-year-old boy and he says, "Why are you crying?" And he says, "I want you to know you don't recognize me, but I'm the son of Yankala. And 10 years ago, when I was 7 years old, they made a match for me and the bride. But my father got bankrupt right after the match, and the wedding was canceled by the bride's family. But I know deep in my heart that she's my soulmate, and I'm still deeply in love with her." And they even did already the financial agreement between the families. And I couldn't hold my tears in anymore. I was so heartbroken. And so Moishele, of course, was stunned. And he said, "Go get the bride." And he calls the bride. And he says to the bride, he asks her, "Is it true that they matched you with this boy?" And she said, "Yeah." And he asks her, "And do you love him?" And she started crying also from the depth of her heart. And she said, "Yeah, I know that he's my soulmate. I love him so much." And I know.
I cry very easily.
And Moishele didn't hesitate a moment. He called his son and he told him the story. And the son was obviously stunned also. And there was a deep silence in the room. And then Moishele says to his son, "You understand what's happening here, right? We can't go through with the wedding. Take this boy to our house and give him your suit." And to the boy he said, "From now on, I want you to see yourself as one of my children, and I will take care of you and your bride for the next few years, for everything that you need." And the Bach, when he told the story, now I'm going to cry. When the Bach told the story, he said, "I've never seen anybody walk his child to the chuppah with so much joy as this Moishele walked this boy to the chuppah." And he said the way he danced with him was mamish till the high heavens. And then he said, "When I came to Lemberg, I didn't know why he was meriting to be my neighbor in heaven. When I left Lemberg, I didn't know why I merited to be his neighbor in heaven."
You've heard that story before?
I know probably every Chasidic story.
And what happened to Moishele's son?
He probably found another girl.
I love them. They
I'm sure he did.
They're amazing. They really teach us.
Yeah.
So there's another few words here about it. So he says, "My dear friends, this is so deep. On one hand, there is humility, but then there is something deeper. And that is to know to rejoice in someone else's joy. The great downfall of humanity started with the jealousy between Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm.
A brother's jealousy that ended up being turning into a bloodshedding. And what is the great fixing to that ancient sin? The great fixing is that we need to learn to rejoice from the bottom of our hearts with somebody else. I want you to know to go to a wedding is one of the greatest fixings there is to jealousy between people. Because what's happening in a wedding? A couple is getting married and they're inviting the whole people to rejoice with them. And I want you to know it's a great thing to come and really rejoice with the chassan and kala on the great day of their lives. I want you to know in every invitation to a wedding, there is another invitation, an invite for a hope for a new world, for a world where people can rejoice with somebody else, a world when something good is happening to someone, we're all rejoicing with them from the bottom of our hearts. And it reminds me a story about the Shatner, Reb Mordechai Feivish, who was the establisher of the Osiatin Chassidus, and from the house of Rojin. So one of the sons of the Rizhiner Rebbe, was told about the Shatner, how each one of his brothers is the greatest. The Shatner used to tell how each of his 5 brothers, each one of them is the most amazing in the world. And one time, after he finished telling how his brothers are amazing, one of his Hasidim said, "And what's great about you, Rebbe?"
I'm waiting for someone to.
So the Shatner answered, "Isn't that enough that I have such amazing 5 brothers?" So when the Hasidim used to tell the story, they used to say, this was the exact unbelievable madrega of the Shatner, to learn to learn to rejoice in somebody else's holiness, in somebody else's greatness. And who knows, probably that's the highest level you can reach. So also in memory today, this week is tomorrow, today is the birthday of Reb Shlomo and his twin brother Elichaim.
And Jewish brother?
Yeah. What do you mean?
What else is there?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should
know. Yeah, obviously they were both Jews.
No, I'm saying
Hebrew as opposed to
Jewish birthday, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jewish birthday, yeah. Not Jewish brother, yeah. Yeah, the Jewish birthday. Today's their Jewish birthday. And one time, they were very funny together. And they were both like, they had such a contagious laughter. And so one time Shlomo said to Elichaim, "I want you to know I'm greater than you." So Elichaim raised an eyebrow. So he said, "I'm greater than you because you're my brother." So yeah. Anyway, so he said, I have a brother like you, and you don't have a brother like me, like you. Yeah. So
on social media, how many people look at people that have money and they're busy poking at their negative? Look how old this person looks. Look how,
instead of just rejoicing with how you look, with what you have, and rejoicing with how they look and what they have, and not judging them and
what they've accomplished.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned Cain and Abel. I love that story because Hashem says to Cain, "Why are you downcast? Like, do tshuva, and you'll be fine. And you'll give a better offering next time. Otherwise, sin crouches at the door."
Right.
All he had to do was tshuva.
Right.
So my question is, how do you jump from fear and envy and jealousy to suddenly rejoicing? So the way I do it is, I'll just answer myself, and I don't want to hear everything. My thing is, I look at wanting to put myself above other people to make myself feel better. Or, being afraid I will be abandoned. All these stupid defects, right? I look at the list, I check it off. Yes, I do this. I give them to Hashem. And then I try to help people. And that gets me, then I can rejoice. But I've tried for years to go to simchas, especially as a single woman, going to these weddings. And I was single, trying to find a husband for 13 years. Going to weddings, it's very hard. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, tangentially related to this, not directly, of course. I still cannot fathom how in this country you can go from Yom HaZikaron to Yom Ha'atzmaut at the beat of a bell. I cannot understand.
I think it's our greatness.
I can't understand it. I struggle with it every year.
I think we all struggle with it every year, and I think, and it touches us to the deepest core of our being, that ability to know that sadness and joy go hand in hand, that the people who gave their lives for this land are the ones who made this land possible, that we can cry and laugh at the same time, that even the people who mourning their loved ones for giving their lives for this land are able to go back a second later and start dancing and knowing that their loved ones have given their blood for this land for us to continue living. And I think it makes us an example to the whole world how you can cry and laugh at the same time. And it's actually what we're saying in Birkat HaMazon, in the Tehillim before Birkat HaMazon every day. Azorim berina, azorim bedim'a berina iktzor. Those who will sow with tears will reap with joy.
Right.
But also there's a beautiful Hasidic explanation about it, that you don't put the comma between the tear and the joy. Hazorim bedim'a berina iktzor. You don't do the hazorim bedim'a berina iktzor, but you read it hazorim bedim'a berina. You're sowing with tear and joy, right? And when you're listening to these soldiers and to these families, and even to the families of the victims now, of the captives and whatever, everybody, we all know that the tear and the joy come together in the same action, not even one after the other, but mamish in the same action.
They teach that about Abraham when he was at the Akedah. He had the grief and the joy of doing Hashem's will and giving up his son.
Right?
I have a feeling that that's one of the attributes in the face of all the insanity that keeps the Jewish nation going.
Right.
Everything that the nation has been put through, the Jews have been put through, that's what keeps us going.
Yeah, totally.
And even
Totally.
now, it's like everything's
Especially
insane.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The feelings that we're tormented with in especially the last few days, this whole last year and something, but especially, it's like you haven't read about it in any book, right? But whatever they went through in the Holocaust, you also didn't read about in any book. And whatever they went through in communism or Inquisition, they also did not read about any book. And what we're going through now, we also don't have the guidance of how to go through it,
No.
But
I'm sorry.
yeah, but it's like I was watching an interview with four of the ladies who were, four of the older ladies in their 80s who were kidnapped and returned. And the power that comes from them is so inspirational. And I'm like, if they can do it, we can do it. Some of them have gone through the Holocaust and now have gone through this captivity, And they're like such a light to the nations, such a light to us, and such a light to the nations. I'm like, I don't know why they had to go through it, but I know that if they had to go through it and we had to go through whatever we're going through, we have to use it to spread light. If they're managing to uplift themselves and spread light through first going through the Holocaust and then going through this and still having light to spread, then who am I not to?
I don't like to say this. Hashem, please don't test me. I don't want any tests. But I do know that going through Ruben's illnesses, we grew more through that than we've ever grown our whole lives. Unfortunately, this is how we grew. I wish it
Through
was
suffering.
Yeah, going through hardship with bringing Hashem in the.
Or we can have a little shortcut by looking at other people, taking inspiration from them, and going through our own suffering with more chen, with more grace.
Right.
And when we go through it with more grace, we do dam takat din. And when we're able to say Hashem Melech, before being able to say Hashem Malach, right? Like when do we say Hashem Malach? After we see how things have unfolded in a positive way.
Right.
But if we're able to say Hashem Melech in the situation, in the suffering, we bring the redemption so much closer. And I'm not even saying on a mystical level, just on a simple level. Look at every situation you had in life. Whenever you were able to keep your serenity, to keep your wisdom, to keep your, your whole self together, right, through the situation, and you brought the realistic outcomes to a much better unfolding right, than if you fall apart first,
Yeah.
right? No?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Let's do Azorim Bedima. Azorim Bedima, Bedima Berina. Azorim Bedima, Bedima Berina. Azorim Bedima, Bedima Berina. Bedima Berina Yikzo. Tiri dai da da dai 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 ai dai dai ai da dai dai ai ya da dai ai 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 dai dai ai 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 ya da dai 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 ai dai dai ai da dai dai ai ya da dai ya da dai ai dai 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 hey. Azorim bedima 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 azorim bedima 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 azorim bedima 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 iktzor.
Thank you.
Is that on?